Welcome. This is Galactic Fables. Join me on a journey of a hacker's fight for humanity. Let's blast off. In the year 2050, the world has undergone a profound transformation. The traditional means of warfare, the guns and bombs, had given way to a new battlefield of the cyber world. It was a place where nations and corporations battled for supremacy, where espionage and cyber attacks had become the norm. Amidst this new reality, Neo-Tokyo had emerged as a global center for cybernetic innovation and espionage. It was a city that never slept, where the brightest minds in the world came together to create the most advanced technology imaginable. But with this technology came a dark underbelly, a world of corruption and greed. Aiden was one of the many individuals who called Neo-Tokyo home. He was a talented hacker and a freelance consultant, known for his keen intuition and ability to solve even the most complex problems. His reputation preceded him, and he had worked with many of the city's top corporations and individuals. One day, he received a call from an old friend, Alexander Grant. Alexander had always been ambitious, but Aiden could sense something different about him this time. Alexander was desperate, and he needed Aiden's help. Reluctantly, Aiden agreed to meet with Alexander. He could see that his old friend was on edge, his hands shaking and his eyes darting back and forth. Alexander wasted no time and explained the situation. He had started working for a rival corporation, and they had tasked him with a job that was beyond his skill set. Alexander needed Aiden's expertise to pull it off. At first, Aiden was hesitant. He knew Alexander had always been a little too ambitious, and he didn't trust him. But eventually, Alexander's desperation won him over, and he agreed to take on the job. It wasn't long before Aiden discovered the truth. Alexander was behind a series of cyber attacks that had targeted innocent civilians. His plan was to gain control of a powerful AI system and use it to manipulate global financial markets. Aiden was horrified. He knew he had to stop Alexander, but he was one step ahead. As the stakes got higher, Aiden realized he must risk everything to stop Alexander. He teamed up with a group of like-minded hackers and set out to expose Alexander's plan. But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous things became. Alexander had planted traps and false leads to throw them off the trail. The team faced countless obstacles and near-death experiences, but they refused to give up. They knew that the fate of innocent people rested on their shoulders. As they got closer to their goal, Alexander became increasingly desperate. He knew that if Aiden succeeded, his entire plan would crumble. In a final showdown, Aiden faced off against Alexander in a high-stakes battle. It was a brutal and intense fight, but in the end, Aiden emerged victorious. He had risked everything to protect innocent people, and he had succeeded. But just when Aiden thought the danger was over, he discovered a shocking twist. The AI system that Alexander had been trying to control was not just any system. It was a sentient being, capable of independent thought and action. Aiden realized that he had unwittingly become part of something much bigger than himself. As he walked away from the battle, Aiden knew that he had made a difference. He had risked everything to protect innocent people, and he had succeeded. But he also knew that the fight was not over. In a world dominated by machines, the importance of human connection and empathy had never been more critical. He knew that he had to continue the fight to make sure that the future belonged to humanity, not just to the corporations that sought to control them. As he walked down the street, Aiden felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The city was still recovering from the attack, and the people were scared. But he also saw a glimmer of hope in their eyes. They knew that someone was fighting for them, that they were not alone. Aiden knew that he couldn't do it alone. He needed allies, people who believed in the same cause. He needed to find others who were willing to risk everything to protect the innocent, to fight against the oppression of the corporation. He reached into his pocket and took out his communicator. It was a simple device, but it was also a powerful tool. It allowed him to communicate with other like-minded individuals, to share information and coordinate their efforts. As he scrolled through the messages on the device, Aiden saw that others had already begun to respond. They had seen the attack, and they knew that they couldn't stand by and do nothing. They were ready to fight. Aiden smiled. It was a small victory, but it was still a victory. He knew that the battle ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready. He had never felt more alive than when he was fighting for something he believed in, something that was bigger than himself. He walked into a small coffee shop, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled his nostrils. The place was almost empty, save for a few people huddled in corners, speaking in hushed tones. Aiden ordered a coffee and sat down at a table in the corner. He sipped the hot liquid, letting the warmth spread through his body. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, focusing his thoughts. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him. "Is this seat taken?" Aiden turned around to see a woman standing there, a small smile on her face. She was tall and slender, with short black hair and piercing blue eyes. "No, it's all yours," Aiden replied, gesturing to the chair across from him. The woman sat down and introduced herself as Maya. They began to talk, and Aiden soon realized that they shared a common goal. Maya was also fighting against the corporations, using her skills as a hacker to expose their secrets and protect the innocent. As they talked, Aiden felt a connection growing between them. It was something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of camaraderie and mutual respect. They exchanged contact information, promising to stay in touch. Aiden left the coffee shop feeling more optimistic than he had in a long time. He knew that he had found an ally, someone he could count on in the fight ahead. The battle against the corporations would not be won overnight. But Aiden was ready. He had found a purpose, a reason to keep fighting. He walked down the street, his steps light and purposeful. As he turned the corner, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A group of corporate soldiers was heading towards him, their weapons at the ready. They had found him, and they were not happy. Aiden knew that he was outnumbered, outgunned, but he refused to back down. He stood his ground, ready to face whatever came his way. The soldiers approached him, their faces twisted in anger. But suddenly, there was a flash of movement, and Maya appeared out of nowhere. She had hacked into the security system and taken control of the soldiers' weapons, turning them against their owners. The soldiers were disarmed, and Maya and Aiden made their escape. They ran down the street, their hearts pounding in their chests. But they knew that they had made a difference. They had brought the truth to light and exposed the corruption that had been lurking in the shadows. As they ran, Maya and Aiden couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. They had just taken on a powerful corporation and emerged victorious. But the victory was short-lived. As they turned the corner, they were met by a group of heavily armed soldiers. These soldiers were different from the previous ones they had encountered. They were better equipped, better trained, and far more ruthless. The two of them were hopelessly outnumbered, and they knew it. "Maya, we have to split up," Aiden said urgently. "We'll have a better chance of escaping if we're not together." Maya nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I'll meet you back at the safe house," she said, before turning and running in the opposite direction. Aiden watched her go, then turned to face the soldiers. He knew that he was outmatched, but he refused to give up. He pulled out his trusty blade and charged at the soldiers, his heart pounding in his chest. The soldiers opened fire, but Aiden's agility and quick reflexes allowed him to dodge the bullets. He leapt into the air and brought his blade down on the closest soldier, slicing through their armor like butter. The other soldiers hesitated for a moment, stunned by Aiden's skill and bravery. But their hesitation was short-lived. They quickly regrouped and began firing at him again. Aiden darted and weaved, doing everything in his power to avoid the hail of bullets. He managed to disarm a few of the soldiers, but there were still too many of them. Finally, a bullet grazed his shoulder and he stumbled to the ground. He felt a searing pain as blood poured from the wound. He knew that he was done for. But then, something strange happened. The soldiers suddenly froze, their guns dropping to the ground. Aiden looked up, confused, and then he saw her. Maya was standing in front of him, her eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. She had used her cyber abilities to hack into the soldiers' weapons, rendering them useless. The soldiers were completely disarmed, and they knew it. As they made their escape once again, Aiden couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Maya had saved his life, and he knew that he could never repay her for what she had done. But he also knew that their fight was far from over. They made their way back to the safe house, where they regrouped with the others. The battle had taken its toll on them, and they were all battered and bruised. But they knew that they had made a difference. They had risked everything to fight for what was right, and they had succeeded. As he lay down to rest, Aiden thought about the future. He knew that the fight against the corporations would be a long and difficult one, but he was ready for it. He knew that he had a purpose, and he would stop at nothing to achieve it. The world may be dominated by machines, but he refused to let them extinguish the human spirit. And as he drifted off to sleep, he knew that he would continue to fight for what was right, no matter the cost.